Hi, I'm Will Trackman, General Counsel of Mountain States Legal Foundation. With me here today is Joshua Young. Josh, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Josh. I've worked for the Department of Corrections for the last several years until recently. I went to Will some months ago now about a new equity, diversity, and inclusion training in our work, which I felt was very problematic. And Will agreed to work with me on that. And I don't know how much you want me to go into right this
Yeah, that's
second.
great so far. That's a good introduction. So yesterday, Mountain States Legal Foundation filed a complaint in federal district court in the District of Colorado on behalf of Josh under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. That provision is a federal law that protects employees who are the victims of race discrimination. We alleged in federal court that Josh had to suffer a hostile environment because of race discrimination that was occurring in the Department of Corrections based on the training materials that were promulgated. Those training materials were developed and distributed by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. They were given to the Department of Corrections. Josh, as you just heard, was a housing sergeant in the Department of Corrections. He was forced to go through the training, to absorb the concepts, to answer questions as part of the training. This was annual training, so it would have been reoccurring if Josh hadn't resigned. And these were very, very troubling training materials that we're about to go through. But before we do that, Josh, do you want to give me a little bit about your bio? Tell me about yourself and your, where you live, what facility you are at, and a little bit about your family life.
Yeah, sure. So we moved out here to Colorado in about 2015. I started working for the Colorado Department of Corrections in 2017, and was, when I first arrived, happy with the mission that they had to rehabilitate people there. I felt it gave me a good purpose while I was working there. I'd made more money in other places, but I felt a deep sense of satisfaction that we were being able to do those positive things. And over time, I noticed that the state was gradually adding things that seemed to inhibit that mission that they had. And this was one of the worst things, is that they began training, telling us that whiteness was a problem, that we needed to watch out for all the racist activity, tell on each other during, if we saw something that happened wrong. And there's multiple just major cultural things that they were asking us to do that didn't seem to be in line with the mission at all, and in fact would hurt us in front of inmates. We were worried, working in housing, that's all you hear all day is how just because of when you walk in the door that you're white and you're automatically a racist when you walk in the door. And I was very saddened to see the state agree with that take, with the training that they sent out. And I thought it was harmful to our ability to manage inmates. I worked later in visiting toward the end of the time when I left. And in visiting, we have to work with members of the public, and so we have to be able to hold them accountable to certain rules. There's things that can't get introduced to the prison, so we have a lot of things that we have to enforce there. And I felt like the state was cutting our legs out from under us, because if I had to say something, then I was then going to be faced with the state's own training that says I need to deal with my racist problem, and that's the reason I'm confronting them.
Yeah. With me on the conference today is attorney Aaron Earhart, who's going to be walking us through some of these documents. Aaron, do you want to show us the glossary that Mr. Young was presented with as part of the background for all the terms that he was going to be shown as part of his training? You can see from the outset that this is the glossary, the nice big Colorado Office of Health Equity stamp on the front here. Here we have the definition of white exceptionalism. So what is the definition of white exceptionalism? It's the belief held by some white allies that they are the exception to white racism, that even though they fail to address the implicit ways in which they perpetrate in which they perpetuate white supremacy, these individuals are more interested in not seeming racist than actually improving the lives of people of color. Sometimes referred to as fake equity. Amazing that this is the official definition of white exceptionalism that you were told to internalize as part of your state-mandated annual training. You can see that white racism is the rule, and some people have to believe that they're the exception, but that's not true, that they aren't the exception. They all perpetuate white supremacy. Josh, what do you make of that you were part of perpetuating white supremacy and white racism merely because of the color of your skin?
Well, I guess first of all, I want to say that the culture at the prison is very good in terms of staff relationships there. We get along really great. Racism wasn't a topic that came up between us. We treat each other based on our actions, based on how we perform. We treat each other professionally, and the idea that skin color somehow matters in any of this is ridiculous to me. I don't think the idea that the amount of melanin in my skin is somehow informs my character or somebody else's is insulting. And that's what the state is teaching.
Well, I have bad news for you, because you just expressed white fragility, which is another definition on the screen here, which says discomfort and defensiveness often triggered by feelings of fear or guilt on the part of a white person when confronted by information about racial inequity and injustice. So here, the state of Colorado is telling you that if you denied that you were a racist or that you were perpetuating white supremacy, that was just white fragility, that was some sort of denialism or maybe some guilt that you were feeling. How do you feel about that?
Well, I believe we're all created in God's image, and that our skin color is about as relevant as the kind of, whether we like cream or sugar in our coffee. I mean, that's about how relevant it is in forming our character.
Yeah. Why don't we take a look at the definition of race, which is, again, every time your training mentions race, this is the glossary that you're supposed to refer to back so that you can see the definition of a term. Okay, so race was a social construct that artificially groups people by skin tone and other physical traits. Okay. The concept has no genetic or scientific basis, and it was created and used to justify social and economic oppression of people of color by white people. Interesting that it was created by white people to justify oppression of people of color. So when you look at the word race in all of your training materials, whether it be about, we're all people of different races, you're supposed to refer back to this definition of race in order to interpret that word. How does it make you feel that white people invented race in order to justify the social and economic oppression of people of color?
Look, I mean, that seems ridiculous on its face. I mean,
Yeah.
we've certainly had problems in our country in the past. That's happened. That's no use not talking about that. But saying that it was invented by white people to justify oppression seems like quite a stretch. And then the idea that we need to use that somehow, it seems a little bit silly. Yeah.
How troubling is it that it's not just you, Josh? It's everybody in the Department of Corrections that's taking this training.
Yeah, and I know so many good people, men and women that work there, and to have this being taught to them as if they're some sort of problem, it's not fair. I don't think.
No, it's not. And my heart goes out to you and all your colleagues at the Department of Corrections, because if you think about it, it's not just Caucasians, it's not just African Americans, it's every individual, regardless of their skin color, is being taught this information as part of the officially blessed curriculum of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that this is the kind of stuff that's actually happening, and it's very troubling. Aaron, why don't we go to the definition of BIPOC, just so we can do another one of these definitions. Again, this is the glossary against all terms are set off as part of the training. BIPOC, an acronym for Black, Indigenous People, and People of Color. The term is used to acknowledge that Indigenous and Black people have been most impacted by whiteness, both historically and in the present day. This shapes the experience of and relationship to white supremacy for all people of color within a U.S. context, including inmates, I suppose, who are suffering from white supremacy, if they're people of color. I mean, how do you think that affected your colleagues and the inmates who, let's focus on your colleagues first, who are being told that whiteness, so they're turning the word white, people who are white, into a term now that is an oppressive term. How do you think that affected your colleagues when they heard that there is such a thing as whiteness?
Well, they got to walk into these housing units every single day, and they're dangerous situations. You're face to face with inmates all the time. And we're supposed to treat them fairly, and we're supposed to treat them, we're supposed to treat everyone the same way. If they mess something up, we're supposed to hold them accountable to it. And as well as, praise them when they're doing something well. But now this comes in and says that automatically a certain skin color is going to walk into that housing unit and have a problem, and that's blessed by the state. And we already deal with that from the inmates. They're already saying that, we walk in and we're automatically a racist because of our skin color. Now the state of Colorado is saying, oh yes, that's absolutely true. You're automatically a racist because of the way you were born.
If you hadn't come to me when you did and shown me these documents, I would not have believed you. I would have said, surely you're blowing this out of proportion. There can't be a document like this that's actually going out to literally every prison guard, sergeant in the prison system in Colorado. This is unbelievable to me that this is part of the officially mandated diversity training in the state of Colorado.
Well, yeah, and this is I believe it's from the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And they're at a state website where this is currently, we're pulling this down.
You can get this now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And right now, everybody in the whole state, I think, is actually going to be using this training, not just the Department of Corrections. I think this is a statewide thing. And while I think it's maybe more harmful in corrections because we have to have some credibility when we approach people, and people have to trust that we're going to treat them fairly and with respect and everything else. And this seems to make it indicate that we have some giant hurdle that we have to climb over in order to do that fairly with people.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the state website. Aaron, do you want to flag the guidance for leaders that's on the state website? So this is a document that the state of Colorado publishes on its equity website for leaders who are leading race discussions, which apparently is a thing that if you have a workplace discussion, you're supposed to get into conversations about race. Again, remember, the definition of race in the glossary is the definition that you're supposed to refer back to about how race is invented to oppress people of color and to justify oppression. Aaron, do you want to focus on what leaders are supposed to do if conversations get difficult? That last sentence in that highlighted paragraph is if a leader is challenged and is asked by a participant, what if you haven't experienced racism, or if you have benefited from privilege or power? The discussion leader is supposed to acknowledge that white norms in our communities and workplaces can leave others feeling out. Now, can you imagine if a discussion leader is supposed to acknowledge white norms? Josh, what do you think of a white norm? Can you imagine being told that white norms are making discussions about race harder in the workplace?
Well, my first response to that is just utter confusion. I don't know what a white norm is.
Yeah, right. I know, it's getting a little confusing.
I know what Christian norms are. I know what our cultural norms are. I don't know what a white norm is. Yeah.
That's officially sanctioned training for workplace leaders, having conversations about race in the workplace. Aaron, do you want to show us the other document? This is another link on the Colorado website, Facilitating Difficult Conversations About Race, 5 successful strategies. I'm skeptical that these are actually successful strategies. This is another tactic for controlling conversations about race. Again, the definition of race, you got to go back to the glossary for that. If a heated dialogue occurs on race, the conversation between diverse participants is typically on the content level, but the true dialogue is taking place on a less visible level, white talk versus back talk. Common statements, content level, when white talk occurs. It's my family didn't own slaves. I had nothing to do with the incarceration of Japanese Americans. You can see, hearkening back to white fragility and the concept that you can never deny your racism. That's just mere white talk. Again, specifically, this is blessed by the state of Colorado. This is on the state of Colorado's website. You can access it right now if you go to the website. These are the sorts of things that led to Mountain States Legal Foundation's lawsuit against the state of Colorado. You can access the lawsuit and all of these exhibits, which were filed with the court yesterday as part of our federal complaint in the District of Colorado on behalf of Josh Young, as part of our Title VII case. I mean, it's pretty obvious why we thought these things led to a hostile environment in Josh's case. We've asked specifically for these types of training to stop. We've told the court there is no way that these items didn't create a hostile environment for Josh and continue to create a hostile environment as long as they exist in the workplace, and that these need to be taken down. We do have a little bit of breaking news for those on the call. We got a judge assignment this morning. Judge Brimmer will be the judge on the case, so we are very pleased to go forward. We're very happy that Josh has such a terrific story to tell. On that point, Josh, I mean, what do you say to the folks who might say, well, you're just a disgruntled employee. Maybe they think that you were looking for a way out the door. I mean, you were a rising star in the Department of Corrections, right?
Well, I mean, that's taken a little far, maybe, but I
don't be modest. Go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I was doing fine. I was one of the first ones promoted in our class for in terms of in our facility up to sergeant level, and I ran what I believe is one of the toughest housing units in the state, and for about 6 months, and then I moved into the visiting department, which is typically I've seen other people promoted from there into higher level positions. I like I said, I when I went there originally, I thought the mission of the state was great, but now I think they're doing so much to undermine it. It makes it difficult for us to do the thing that we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And this is one of the more difficult things that they've given us.
Well, we do have some questions from the press on the line, so why don't we go ahead and turn to those?
You have to unmute. You might have to unmute them.
Yeah, unmute everybody in the press. Can you do that?
Nathan has to.
Huh?
Nathan has to.
Okay.
You want me to keep going?
Yeah, we'll unmute.
Yeah.
Great.
Journalists, please unmute yourself if you wish to ask a question.
How long were you with the Department of Corrections?
Almost. Well, I guess it was on my way to 5 years, more than 4.5 years, I think. That was my time there. I started in March 2017, and I worked there until about July-ish or something like that.
And do you still have friends in the system?
I do. I still stay in contact with several of the people that I work with there. There are a lot of good people that I worked with.
And this was annual training, right?
This is right. This is annual training.
So you would have had to go through this training year after year after year.
Yes, and I thought it was important that somebody try to do something about it. It doesn't seem very productive or helpful to anybody there. It's a difficult job as it is. They have a hard time keeping people. It's very stressful. The hours are long, and as you can imagine, you're working next to people that aren't, they sometimes have a lot of things to work on in their own lives, and it's a difficult place sometimes.
I don't have to tell you that being a plaintiff in a federal lawsuit is not a walk in the park. Why did you decide to take a stand and decide to go put yourself and your family through the headache of being a plaintiff in a federal lawsuit, especially against the state of Colorado?
Well, I'm very much a believer in things that are true and right, and And I think this was essentially lying to everybody all the time and causing a difficult situation become more difficult. And I think it was important that somebody did it, and I felt like I was in a position to do that. So
Sometimes in these cases, people are dismissive of Caucasians complaining about diversity training or equity training. Certainly you're not doing this out of ill motives because you're opposed to equal treatment for everybody, right? This is not part of an agenda to subvert equal treatment on the part of everyone, right? Go ahead.
Absolutely not. And like I said earlier, I believe we're all made in God's image. And
They have to unmute themselves.
Yeah, so for reporters on the line, just make sure that you yourselves are unmuted. We're happy to take questions, or if there are comments in the box, I'm happy to look through them and look at them. I have a screen here. I don't mind repeating the questions and the name of the journalist, if that's something that we can do more easily. Okay, well, I'm just going to keep the conversation going for now. Let me know if there are questions from your end, Fiona. Thank you.
So what was I saying? So I think when you tell this story that everybody needs to look through the lens of skin color, it makes you perceive sometimes your own things in a different way. And I think it's harmful to everybody involved to suggest that this is the way that people think, and this is the way that we all naturally want to go all the time. And I had to get taught about it in school before I ever even thought about this question growing up, and so I just think this is not helping our society heal in any sort of way at all.
What would have happened if you and all your colleagues actually internalized this training and really took it to heart and said, okay, we are promoting white supremacy on a daily basis. We need to second guess our conduct and act differently, and second guess our decisions and treat people differently on the basis of their race. How would that have affected prison safety and the way that inmates regarded you?
Well, you can imagine prison's a very difficult place sometimes to work, and dangerous circumstances happen pretty regularly there. And if you're worried about what your coworker thinks of you because the color of your skin is different, is that going to make you hesitate at the wrong time? Is it going to make you worry that they're not going to be there for you when you need them? And then does that change how you interact in difficult and trying situations? These are all questions that I have. I hope that wouldn't happen, but since the state is saying this is the way that people are, then it seems like this could come up, and so I'm worried about that. So,
what about inmates? Suppose inmates of different races were involved in a scuttle, and you or your colleagues were treating the inmates differently because of their race. What are the potential dangers that could arise?
Oh, we'd have, it would cause all sorts of problems. We could have more violent situations. And is this a question that we have? Or
no.
Okay.
I'm just going to reiterate that if the reporters have questions, please do unmute yourself or type it in the box, and I will be happy to ask it. Okay. Go ahead.
Anyway, if we don't treat these guys fairly, then it causes a number of problems. It causes problems with our authority. It causes problems with compliance when we need it. Sometimes something scary happens. We need these guys, let's say, to go back in their cells, and so we need that cooperation. And when we don't have credibility, it impedes that cooperation between us and the inmates.
Yeah. And what do you hope to accomplish out of this lawsuit?
Well, I'm hoping this lawsuit will end this sort of training in the Colorado state level and in other places as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Josh. I really appreciate your time and all your comments today.
Yeah, no problem.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. All of you who attended. Thank you to my colleague Aaron for helping to run the documents. Thank you to Josh and his family for being a participant and a brave brave participant in this process. Thank you to all of our folks here. Thank you to the reporters who came and for writing stories on this piece, if you choose to. This is an important piece. I think it sheds light on what's happening in our prison system and around the state. This is training that has no place, in any employer's diversity training, and certainly not in state-mandated training. So we look forward to helping you and answering any questions to the extent you want to report on this, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you to everyone.